My name is Isabelle McConville. I am a bookseller and producer here at Barnes& Noble, and today I am so excited to speak with Loretta Rothschild, author of Finding Grace. This is an incredible, jaw-dropping, and I mean jaw-dropping, story of home, heartbreak, grief, love, and family, and many, many other things. Loretta, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. So, can we please start with you setting up the story of your new novel for us?
Yes. Well, it's quite a hard book to talk about, as you know.
Yes, we are going to try and avoid major
Yes.
spoilers. So, we're going to
So,
do some dancing today.
I'm going to do some dancing. Exactly. So, it's an improbable love story between two characters who are brought together through unforeseen events.
Mhm.
And I suppose it's about sort of past loves weaving with present love and how those those all kind of coexist.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the way that you balance past love with new love and just present love is so beautiful, the way that you balance that in this book, because again, without going too into detail in what happens in this book, the very back of the book says she's the secret love of his life. So we know that something's going on. But I think that the way that you balance those different kinds of love is it makes for a very great reading experience.
Oh, I'm so pleased. I'm so glad you enjoyed it because it is a fine balance. And I think
Hmm.
that if I learned something overwhelmingly in this book, it's that, you know, grief and love are co-pilots. They are close, they are together, and one doesn't really exist without the other. And that was a
Yeah.
very enjoyable discovery to go down, especially through the eyes of, Honor, because she was a very enjoyable narrator to write and a sort of unexpected narrator in a way, but very great company.
Honor is such an interesting character because she, like you said, is the narrator of this book. How did you make that decision? Because I know you just said it was unexpected, and I loved her as the narrator of this book.
Oh, I'm so pleased. Well, I actually wrote the entire book in the third person first.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So I wrote the book. I then reread the book and realized that it was Honor's story to tell.
Hmm.
And she needed to tell it. It was missing something without her. And I
Hmm.
think over the course of years and years and years, I realized that actually her perspective was my sort of saving grace, if you will, because she had a level of understanding about the characters and their decisions and what they'd been through that no one else in the book had.
Yeah.
So it was a real gift to kind of land on that. But it became very clearly to me. I remember I was sitting on an airplane with my husband, and at this point, he has no idea what I'm writing or what I'm talking about. He just sort of nods along and is like, okay, she's in that mood where she's going to start talking about this sort of imaginary world that she created. And I sort of turned to him and I said, I've made a terrible mistake. I've written the whole book from the wrong perspective. It needs to be from Honor's perspective. And he said, okay. And I just thought, yeah, now I have to go and do the whole thing again. But, it was all informative writing, but, she had to tell that story. No one could tell it
Yeah.
like her.
She was such an incredible narrator. And that's so surprising to me because this book just feels so fully formed in a way where that really shocks me because she's the perfect narrator for this book. How did that help you get to know your characters more on that second rewrite?
That's a great question. I think if I was honest with myself, it was a few drafts of a first draft. So I think
Mm,
that the characters were they were always the same characters. They
right.
always I always knew who they were, but they really became three-dimensional through her eyes because of
Yeah.
the information she had. She could almost get in their minds, even though she couldn't. She could say, if Annie didn't like oysters, we wouldn't need to see it because Honor would tell us an anecdote where she got food poisoning
Yeah.
Honor gave it all the characters that she already knew. She took them from being, somewhat two-dimensional to three-dimensional just by her POV. And I think that was where it got really fun, because she loved those characters, but she also saw them in a way that she wasn't expecting. I'm always so conscious of putting my foot in it and giving away at the end of the first chapter. So I'm not I'm not going to make that mistake.
No worries. Where did this story really start for you? Like, what sparked its first creation for you?
So I think if I really, really could think of I think a lot of things informed it. And I always say, as a writer, when someone asks me what I do or how it works or where I get my ideas from, I just simply say the camera is always rolling. So even though the first part of the idea might have already been kind of working its way onto my hard drive, literally and metaphorically, it kind of really blew off the page, I suppose, at two different points. But one point that really sticks in my mind, which is an error that actually happened to me. There's a letter in the book that is not meant to end up where it does. And that actually happened to me. I received a letter, not with the same content as what Tom receives, but it was a letter I should never have gotten, and it was addressed to me. But inside was a letter completely, a person I'd never met. It was no connection to me. It was just a human error. It went in the wrong envelope. When someone was at work, they just picked up the wrong one and sent it to me. So that was really a fun thing to think, oh, what would happen if you got a letter you weren't supposed to get? So that's really how the kind of plot started to drive forward. And then, other big things I can't really mention were already growing in my mind. And then I just did the puzzles and the pieces and put them all together.
Oh, that's so great. The very first line in this book is, the last time we were at the Ritz in Paris, I had my 5th miscarriage at breakfast. Off the bat, we're jumping into the voice, the incredible voice of Honor. And there's already tension. There's already a story there. We already want to know what's going on. Can you tell me a little bit about writing that first sentence? Did you always have it? Did it come later? And also, what did you want it to do for readers right off the bat?
It's interesting because the end of this book, the end of this first chapter of this book, I always knew how it was going to end. And I knew it at the end of chapter 1. The first line came once Honor became the narrator. And I think after learning and really focusing on the craft of novels and how fiction has how fiction, really good fiction, is written, how to write, I really spent a lot of time learning about how to write fiction, how to craft novels. It wasn't enough to simply have an idea. I had to actually execute it in a way that would make it digestible for everybody else. So, I learned so much, and it's really my passion. I love learning about craft. I loved, I would go to a lecture every day about writing fiction if I could, because it is so mind-blowing to it changed my whole life once I understood craft, and I found myself kind of being able to kind of not contain my ideas, because it isn't a containment, but it was like I had this island I could swim back to and plot around, and I always knew it was going to be there, because obviously when you're creating an entire world and a whole book, it's quite overwhelming. So I definitely committed to learning how to make this novel the best I could do. And with the first line, that really is one of the biggest lessons I learned from studying fiction writing. And that was, don't hold back information, and make sure that you aren't keeping any secrets from your reader. At the very, really, you really have to make sure that you tell the reader what your character wants. And it sounds really sort of simple, but actually that first line tells the character where we are, what she wants, and there's a problem with what she wants, which is which is what you want your book to be. You want things you want and things you can't have, and the reasons you can't have them. So, the first line really was the kind of I remember learning that day, just remember realizing I don't need to know what Honor had for breakfast. And once I realized that, and it sounds very simple, but a lot of times I would, 10 years ago, I would be writing when I woke up, things that I thought were important, but actually they weren't. They were important to learn, not to do, by writing and writing and writing. But overarching all of it was what is going on. Mm-hmm. And I think the reason that sentence really works is because there are no secrets from the reader, and you learn very quickly that this is a person that wants to tell you bluntly and concisely what's going on. So it's like a flavor of Honor in a one line. So if you like that one, you might like the next one and the next one.
I like what you said about getting into the details, but not too closely, not looking too closely at the story. Like you said about 10 years ago, maybe you would have started with I woke up and then I had this for breakfast. That's such a great point, because I think that, like they say, the devil's in the details, right? But if we have too many details, it'll take us out of it. But just the perfect amount, like finding that balance, is tough. That takes years and years sometimes for people to master that.
And also trusting yourself, which really it means trusting your reader will have enough. And that's one of the things I enjoy most, is trusting my reader. And I don't over tell things. I intend not to anyway, because I trust myself that they will either know it now, know enough, or know later. But I don't have to put everything into this first chapter. I just need to tell them what is going on in this moment, which will tell them so much more than that. But that is the focus. You can't get bogged down in anything other than that one thing. And that was a lesson one has to really learn, because, or you're just born with that great skill. But, I definitely had to learn how to push out the noise and focus on the character's very specific drive.
Yeah, I think it's like a symbiotic relationship, right? You need to trust your reader, and I think the reader needs to trust that the author is going to take them where they need to go throughout this story. And again, back to just finding the balance with those details, especially right from the start. I think that also plays into world building, right? Which I think is so important, not just in science fiction and fantasy, but we need those details for world building in literary fiction too.
Yes, absolutely. And it's really fun to do, to strip back and think, what am I at, not going down the path that you think you need to, but actually trying to wiggle around and find different ways of doing something is incredibly fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And coming back to that first sentence again, we learn about Honor's fertility issues right away with that first sentence. She's been trying to have a second baby, a sibling for her daughter, Chloe, and she and her husband are waiting to hear if their surrogate is pregnant or not. Surrogacy is still, unfortunately, a bit of a taboo subject, I think, in the world today, as well as women's fertility issues. So I'm just curious about why you wanted to approach those subjects in your book and what kind of research you did for it.
Honor wants to have another baby at all costs. Mm-hmm. And, so much so that she's willing to kind of, cause huge arguments in her marriage in order to get what she wants. The conversation is very much around me. It's IVF, surrogacy, all these parenting conversations happen around me, and they're so in my world, in the sense that it's very much, it's not taboo to me. So I think it's something I've never kind of thought of as taboo, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I just wrote about love and and motherhood, fatherhood in the modern world, which takes a different, there's more opportunities now that weren't there before. And as a storyteller, that's fertile ground for storytelling. Excuse the pun, but it really is, with all these advancements in technology, we have all these potential secrets, there's so much that is really exciting for storytelling. So I think that's probably why I wanted to write about it, because the idea that I hadn't been done before. It is a love story, and that's been done and will be done for the rest of time. And that's what I love is love stories, and all platonic and, motherhood and any type of parenthood is a love story. So this is a classic love story in a modern world, told in a modern way. So it felt very natural to me.
I think that's the beautiful part of storytelling, and also why I read, right? Because for someone who may not see the world the same way, that's why we go to fiction, and that's why we read, to try and see things differently. At least I know that's why I read, to try and see the world in a more empathetic, more rounded way. Do you feel the same way about storytelling in that way?
Absolutely. I think some of the most wonderful discoveries I've made through reading and also watching fantastic storytelling is the ability to empathize with a person that you on paper have nothing in common with. And yet you find yourself identifying with them because of something internal that you share with them more than anybody else, that you should be sharing things with on that screen or on that page. And that is, to me, is really when you see something done very, very well. I watched White Lotus recently, and I didn't go in there thinking, oh, I really resonate with that. You just don't know how you're going to get, and that's exciting. To read something and watch something and just be, kind of put in your place in a way, like by yourself, which is, oh, I really misjudged that, and I really actually find that painful, and I thought I couldn't empathize with that character, but here I am sticking up for them, So that's really fun and very human, and I love that. I really, that really gets me excited when I'm put in my place by great storytelling, and my own kind of judgments are wrong, and it's good. It's a good thing to happen.
I do think the best kinds of books kind of hold a mirror to our own morals, our own personalities, our own, how we judge people, just like you were saying. You do that really well in this book too, because you do present a bit of a moral dilemma that I won't get into too much for fear of spoilers. There is a moral dilemma at the center of this book. How did you want to approach writing that? Or how did you approach writing that, excuse me? And did you want readers to feel one way or another with that moral dilemma? Or were you just leaving it open to interpretation, I guess?
When I set out to write, whether it's this book or my next book, I want to pose questions even to myself. Mm-hmm. So I don't go with an agenda. I go with a question, and then that question evolves and it changes, and it's evolving with me. And I think that makes me write again with less judgment and less, it allows me to write in all the characters, being able to put myself in all the characters' shoes. So I definitely didn't set out to answer the question, but rather pose questions that I think are interesting in 2025, that are part of the conversation. And I think if there's one thing I did reading back the book, many, many, many times, I really felt strongly from the start, from the beginning and to the end, just for me, was that if anything, someone asked me, what would you like to come out of the book? And I never really thought about it like that. I wanted people to go into the book and be in their own world. But actually, my mum read the book, and she said to me, I'm really glad that I know more about how to talk about these topics and how a very, very genuine question of concern or love, a question can be asked from such a place of love. And
Mm-hmm.
there's no sort of rule book on how to talk about these new wonderful developments and advancements in technology. So we're learning on the job. So she said to me, I'm just so glad I know that actually it kind of made me think, well, why am I asking that question? I wouldn't ask that question to X. Why am I asking this question to Y? And
Mm-hmm.
I thought, yeah, I'm really pleased that that happened, that helped someone understand something
Yeah.
from a point of view that they had never thought was, because you don't know. Someone might not
Mm-hmm.
say, if someone says, oh, why are you doing IVF? And you think, well, it's not that it's wrong or right. It's that someone might not know that they are asking something that could potentially be sensitive to a person.
Yeah.
And, we're very well versed in certain subjects, but this is relatively new technology. If you think about other things, how long they've been around, and we know how to talk about them. So I was really touched actually that she mentioned that to me, because I would always like to help anyone in any scenario, but to know that it was something that I might never have witnessed or might never have known, and that she felt more comfortable to talk about something, or to feel that she had more of a place at the table to talk about those things with someone, even though she'd never done it. That was
Yeah.
really a nice discovery.
That's so great. It has to be such a unique and incredible experience to have the people in your life read your debut novel. How did that feel? Did you give it also to other family members or friends?
Well, not until right at the end.
Mm.
I was a very secretive writer. I've always written, but I was definitely, I wasn't telling people I was writing a book. A few people knew that I, did workshops and spent a lot of time with writers and was very obsessed with learning about writing, but I never outed that fact. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. I just thought, you know what, when I've done it, I'll tell you. And then it kind of went from there, because I think it's a very vulnerable time. I'd never had anything, I'd never had a book published before. And as you can tell, I love talking about writing. And it's not everyone has that kind of, not everyone wants to talk about writing. So I think it was a good thing to kind of do privately for a long time. And then I found all my people, because they became, my life now. It was just it's a wonderful thing to have done. And I actually, it's such a privilege to be able to do that in private and learn your mistakes alone, and then take them out to workshops, talk to people, go to writing lessons, writing craft, everything. It was just, it's a wonderful thing to be able to do.
Oh yeah, that's so incredible. Something else that honestly took me by surprise when I was reading this book was how funny it is at times. It's truly so funny, and it caught me off guard a lot because a lot of this book is very sad. This book talks about grief, it talks about heartbreak, but the humor that you mixed in was first, I think it was done masterfully. But I want to know, why did you make that decision to kind of balance out the grief with humor? And how was it? What was your process for doing that?
I think it comes back to the grief and love, the co-pilots.
Mm-hmm.
And, with grief comes a lot of intense sadness, and with love comes intense joy. And somewhere in the middle, there is space in the gaps and then the little nuances, and to put a lick of humor in there, because the funniest things can sometimes happen 5 minutes after a terrible thing. That's just life. So
Yeah.
for me, it was just how I'd experienced both of those sensations. Was
Mm-hmm.
they life comes out of nowhere. And also because Honor had such a particular point of view,
Mm-hmm.
she did, like, I had certain rules for her as a narrator that really focused her and allowed her to say things in a way that others can't. I can't say exactly why, but, for example, I made sure that as a narrator, she didn't feel things. She could only observe in a certain
Oh,
way.
yeah.
So she wasn't tangling with the characters that she was talking about or observing. She wasn't contaminating them with her feelings, which would be extremely messy. And actually, at times, I would do it by accident, and it would be messy on the page, and it wouldn't work. I had to have rules for her because of her unique POV. So I had that she couldn't feel and she couldn't smell. Once I had those in line, she could have her personality without any darkness, attached. It definitely helped having her have those rules, because it also set her apart. She wasn't going through what other characters were going through. Yeah, I can't even go down that road. It gets very, very tricky.
That's okay. That's okay. I like what you said about her being set apart as a narrator. I think also just because she has such a unique point of view on just in life. I mean, she's
Yeah.
a incredibly dynamic, really interesting character, aside from even just being the narrator. So I like what you said about that.
Oh, good.
I saw this book as a total masterclass in building tension. That's one of my favorite aspects of this book, is that it feels like you're watching a car crash happening in slow-mo for like a lot of the book. And I just found that to be so incredible because still, again, you're keeping it funny, you're keeping it very heartfelt, you're still talking so poignantly about grief, but also there's this building tension, and it's throughout the entire book. The whole time I was reading this, I was truly on the edge of my seat, just waiting for this reckoning, right? Can you talk a little bit about how you approach building tension in fiction and just in your writing in general? Because I think that was my favorite part of this book.
Well, I'm glad. I mean, it's such an important part of writing, propulsive fiction, if that's what you want to do. How
Hmm.
do you create tension? And actually, my editor, Sarah Cantin, talks about this so succinctly that I won't even attempt to touch on how she puts it. But when I strip it back, it comes back to knowing your characters, and it's very hard to create tension with characters you don't care about.
Yeah.
So to me, it's in the tiny, tiny details along the way it's actually making me care, you care, the reader care more, is actually what's tightening, because things haven't changed. The secret has remained the same,
Hmm.
but we are evolving and we are reacting. So it's almost like, how can I keep making you want this to go a certain way, as
Yeah.
opposed to tricking you or anything like that? It's like, you know, tension is a real. I can feel it. It's a wonderful thing. When I'm watching something and the tension is building, I can't sit still. I'm going, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. So I'm always thinking, how can I make someone do that?
Hmm.
Whenever I, take something apart, whether it's a book or a TV show or a movie, it's really me that's actually changing. And that is a fun sort of, you feel like you're playing, but
Yeah.
it's almost the more minute the detail, sometimes the more tense things can become.
Yeah. I'm thinking about a few very specific details near the end of the book where that's on full display.
It's happening right in front of you, and that's almost where the tension really bites in your stomach. It's when I hope I've built a world big enough for someone to grapple with all these moments and know what might happen, and know what the characters are in the room are like or not, or what they're not like, and
Hmm.
see how they dance around the room
Hmm.
in those moments of tension. it's a fun discovery when you realize you're 75% into a book and you now have way more power than you did at the 5% mark. Because you've earned it. You know, I feel like tension's earned. It's not, it's very, very, it's that's why it builds, you know, because it's just, it's so fun. I loved that book.
I love what you said about tension being earned, because like you said before, you have to care about the characters in order to care about what's happening to them. So why am I so tense? Because I care what's going to happen at the end of this book. I'm completely invested. And I think, again, it comes back to the devil's in the details.
Exactly. And I think tension is something that is often talked about with thrillers and other, but in love stories, you know, the tension is just is sometimes the tiniest throwaway line that you will have taken in, and then there'll be one line at the end of, and it just like hitting the lottery, and then you get that tension, and it just comes, especially in love stories. It's not big events, and this is kind of what Sarah says sometimes. It's actually not always big, and that's helpful when you're writing something.
There's a line from this book that I really love. I have it highlighted in my galley, actually. After a certain age, no one ever gets into bed alone. There's always someone else in the room in some form or another. Whether it's holiday memories or drunken mistakes or ghosts, the past cannot be rewritten. That made me think a lot about baggage, and people are messy. We all have baggage. Whether it's from past relationships, whether it's from family trauma, whether it's from some other disaster that happened to us at some point or another. What made you want to kind of explore that idea of baggage and that idea of messy relationships in this book?
When I wrote that, I remember feeling, you know, immensely empathetic towards both characters that are in that scene. I think I wanted to talk about this sort of, I don't want to say sort of myth, but this idea that one can start again. You know, it's a myth, and I think to sort of set it as an objective, to a character, is so cruel and uninteresting that I was very, very devoted to showing that actually wonderful things come out of past tragedies. And, you know, terrible things come out of wonderful things, you know, that start off wonderful. It was really important to me that there was no dismissal of the past as a bad thing. And it was really important to sort of show, and this is actually the cover of the book, you know, it's a real piece of art, you know, it's by a visual artist who works with embroidery. And you know, this is really a representation of love, you know, past loves interweave with present loves. They don't have to fight. They can create something beautiful, and they should sort of exist together and thicken the weave and thicken the image and thicken our life. So I never wanted to sort of override the past, because it was all coming together. It all weaves together and makes something wonderful. So I think as well, as a writer, it's what you don't get in life that you get in fiction and in really good storytelling is you understand why someone does something. And that is an extremely exciting thing to explore about. As a writer, you want to know the why, the how. Why would my character do this? Why would Tom keep a secret? Well, we know why, because we've seen what happened to him, and we've seen him in a very, very deep well of grief, and we can see that he is not himself. So I never want to miss an opportunity to go into the why. And in life, sometimes you can, you know, something can happen to you and you never understand why someone was short with you that day, or why someone bashed into you really hard, or where they'd come from, or why they looked you up and down in a funny way. You never get to know. Whereas in fiction, one gets to really discover why characters do the things they do. And this all comes back to, building a character that is three-dimensional, that is real, and actually understanding why the changes within the book impact the character, and how those events, Tom changes from chapter 1, from chapter 2, it's an instant change because of what's happened to him. So I always want to know that. I feel that is one of the most wonderful things about fiction is the thickness of it, and the ability to really know why a character or a person would do something good or bad.
I completely agree. That was very beautifully said. Yeah. I also want to talk a little bit about your influences for a minute, because there is a really great reference to Rebecca around like the 200-page mark, I believe it is. And that just knocked me to the floor, because it was perfect for this book, and I hadn't thought about Rebecca when I was reading this book, and then it totally clicked for me. So I thought that was genius. There is a Baudelaire poem that appears throughout the book many times for reasons. Can you talk a little bit about your influences and kind of what helped you build this book?
I definitely read very, very widely. I don't like reading what everyone's reading. I get scared I'm going to say or sound like another author, or I'll start writing in a style and using words that are very, very, that everyone's using. So I do read extremely widely. I pick up things in the vein of what I want, and never sort of too on the nose. For example, I'm writing my next book now, and I was trying to write this scene that was taking place in an operating theater, and I just couldn't get my teeth into it. It was I needed some inspiration. So I looked around, and my full of books, and I just didn't pick something up. And I went downstairs, and in the kitchen there was a crumble. I can't remember, like a rhubarb crumble or something, on the front cover of a cookbook. And I saw it, and to me, because I was thinking operating theatre, I was thinking, oh, this is like someone's body that's been opened up,
Oh, wow.
because it's in my mind. So I pull so I'm reading from a cookbook to write about surgery. That's my brain. So I can't explain it, but I have to go to another place so I feel free. And I feel like I'm looking at something in a way, this page and this, this recipe book on this picture, I am having thoughts that I hope are original and mine. And I love, looking, it's unconscious though. And I said at the beginning, the camera's always rolling. So right. I'm always looking for things to catch me off guard, reading everything, not just reading what I write. I don't just read love stories, even though I think within every book there is always a love story in there. It's picking up the book you think you should read, and then putting that down and just picking up the random one that someone's left on the side. Because you just never know, we never know what might inspire us. But, I do love reading a lot of contemporary fiction, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm reading it for my writing. There are certain things I always read for my writing, and that's, I reread all the classics all the time, because depending on what mood I'm in, I'll find something different. And I love short stories. I love Somerset Maugham. I love Oscar Wilde. I love witty writers. And those are my kind of go-tos and then I'm always open. If someone tells me to read something, I will read it, even if it has absolutely, I'm very curious. I will find something in that book without a doubt.
Is there anything you're reading right now that's just for you and
that's
not
just
necessarily your writing?
Well, I actually just finished Wild Dark Shore. I always get confused about that title,
Yes.
which I loved.
So
And
good.
that was really beautiful. And I just started a book called The Sirens.
Oh yeah. Emilia Hart
Very,
or something.
yes.
Yeah.
I'm reading that right now, and it's so good. I just started. I really did just finish the other one, so I literally just started. I'm only about sort of 30 pages in, but already, in my writer's brain, it's actually one of the most perfect things I could have, because it's fantasy, sort of historical
hmm
fiction, sort of not at all what I'm writing, but actually it's become extremely informative, very influential on the stuff I'm writing now, which is what I love. When I'm not looking for something, it's so much more exciting to find things you want to write about or explore. But it's really exciting. I think she's a great writer too. I'm going to read. There was another book I saw that she wrote. Her last book. I'm gonna get that too, because I think she's great.
I think it's Wayward Girls or Wayward Women. I'm sorry.
Yes, begins with a W for sure. Because I was looking through, but yeah, that was a really exciting one to start. But I always try and have a lot of books on the go around the house, always, in case, they have to be there, otherwise you won't find them. And, even, I have plays in my car, for example, Noel Coward plays that if I have a flat tire, I can read a play, like these little tiny things, books of poetry, collections of poetry, just dotted around the place. I mean, it drives my husband bananas, but, no one will be bored with me. I will always have something for you to read. What is better? I mean, there's nothing better.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Thank you so much for doing this today. I had such a great time talking to you. And again, this is out very soon. Finding Grace by Loretta Rothschild. Loretta, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Hello, readers. It's time for another TBR Top Off. We're going to recommend a couple of fantastic books to pick up when you stop in for your copy of Finding Grace. I'm Mark at my Barnes & Noble in Cincinnati, but I'm going to have one of my favorite book buddies, Donald in Detroit, kick things off for us. Hello, Donald. How are you?
Hi, Mark. How are you? And hi, everybody. So there's a million books I could have picked to go along with this book that we're talking about. It's really, really hard. But what I really wanted to look at was a title that I think people should be reading that's just slightly under the radar. Not enough people are really aware of this book or this author. Her name is Taffy Brodesser-Akner, and she wrote a book a few years ago that really did really well. But this one, Long Island Compromise, is even better than that. It matches with the book that we're talking about in the sense that it's about family and finding your footing and, understanding, all the different nuances of all the different people in your family. But this is also a little bit of what, you could call it like suspenseful in the beginning, but I call it stressful. Because it opens literally with a kidnapping and brutalization in a businessman's driveway. It starts off with such a very stressful set of chapters that then slowly folds into 40 years later and the repercussions and echoing of that event throughout these 40 years of this family's lives and how they have managed to work through mental health issues, chronic illnesses, emotional health, and then also their family history and why this happened to them and where race and class come into this so subtly yet so very importantly. It spans the entirety of this family's history. So winding through decades and generations all the way to this outrageous present, dealing with American Jewish life, their traditions, pursuit of success. I mean, when you hear those things listed off, it's like check, check, check for things we're hearing about today, things that are happening and are of interest in our political landscape. And yet this story takes place and starts off telling that narrative 40 years in the past. So again, I think that when we look at books to match up together, this one feels very relevant and very much a book that people should be reading. And again, that was Long Island Compromise by Taffy Brodesser-Akner. And so, Mark, what do you got?
Well, I have to echo that because Long Island Compromise is so good. Everybody should be reading it, and you are correct. It needs to be in the forefront of people's minds and reading lives for quite a while. And I think does go very nicely with Finding Grace as far as family dynamics and solid writing with some emotional, intense pieces. Because I will say, Finding Grace, I can't wait for people to read this. It's so good. I just think that it's got this quiet tension. It's so moving and just is written so well. It did make me think of a book that came out this month called Greenwich by Kate Broad. I believe this is her debut and also really excellent. It's on the surface, sort of a fizzy, breezy summer novel, but really has a lot of layers underneath that I think readers are going to resonate with pretty heartily. It follows a young woman named Rachel, just 18, and she has recently moved in with her aunt and uncle at their mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut. This is during the summer of 1999. While there, she is trying to mentally, emotionally, physically get away from her home life while still trying to figure out her place in the world, what she should be doing, how she should be and navigate in the waters of this life, and really, most importantly, what she wants and how to get that. I think she does this in a really lovely way because she's exploring her relationship with privilege, her relationship with her budding desires and what that means, and really how a family dynamic is both sometimes only on the surface and sometimes only deep in the trenches. And that beautiful gray, murky middle ground is, I think, where she's trying to just get through and bouncing from that almost vapid surface level and that really tough, deep trench. And to see that ping pong in an 18-year-old feels very relevant. It feels very honest. Just written really well. This is a solid book that I think takes its time to ask important questions and really prod for answers. And I think that's the way that I think readers can take something with them after the book is finished. So check out Greenwich by Kate Broad. It was fantastic and a good one to sort of cap the summer for you. But that is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for tuning in to Pour It Over. Please make sure to give us a rating and subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. You can also follow us on our socials at Barnes & Noble. I'm Mark. You can follow my home store at BN Westchester. Donald, where can we find you?
You can follow my store at BN Livonia.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Happy reading.
Thank you for listening. Pour It Over is a Barnes & Noble production. To help other readers find us, please rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts.